In 2010, Switzerland's Conny-Land theme park debuted a one-of-a-kind Russian-manufactured thrill ride called Cobra. It stands 138 feet tall, has a top speed of 53 miles per hour, but the stats are not what make this ride interesting. When riders step aboard Cobra, they can sit forwards or backwards as they pass along two different spikes, one of which is dubbed the scorpion tail. The only element of its kind ever built, it's essentially an inverted spike. And if it looks like something that would be uncomfortable or maybe not so pleasant, it's because it is. Don't get me wrong, Cobra is absolutely a novelty experience, but I don't know that it's one you're going to want to do multiple times. And I can confidently say that because I reluctantly did it multiple times. I first experienced it in the summer 2024. This was more or less the reason that we visited Conny-Land. We'd heard how bizarre of an experience it was, and we're like, okay, it can't be that bad. Let's see what this is all about. Well, I didn't really like it. I'm glad I did it, but wow, what an experience. That's for sure. So in this review, I'm going to tell you all about it. We'll walk through the layout, talk about what works and what does not. But first, a little background. I mentioned that Cobra was manufactured by PAX. I'd done a couple rides by them before, including Wild Train at Park St. Paul, or the much better Wild Train at Fantasiana, which has unfortunately since closed. Both of those rides provide much better experiences than this one, and the irony is, I'm not even sure we should be calling this a PAX coaster. Shortly after the ride opened, it had to be retracked by Intamin because the original PAX track did not meet the proper safety requirements. And then Sunkid, who typically makes Nautic jets, installed a completely brand new train and control system. So how much of this ride is actually still the original PAX coaster? Pretty much just the lift hill. So this is a real Franken ride if I've ever seen one. And what a view you get as you're pulling up to Conny-Land. The first thing you see is this vertical loop and that scorpion tail. It's right in the middle of the parking lot. You can't miss it. That is your first impression of the park. And the irony is, this is like a family or kids park. This ride does not belong here at all. I can't wrap my head around why they decide to build this because this is essentially Switzerland's only big theme park. It's still pretty small, but imagine this is like your first roller coaster to take you upside down. I don't feel like it's an accurate representation of what roller coasters are like. I just feel like if you grew up going here, there's no way that you could be like a big fan of roller coasters, unless you were visiting places like Europa Park, which is still like several hours away. When you enter Conny-Land, you essentially just go straight back. The station for Cobra is right in the middle of the park. It's actually a pretty well-themed setup here. There's some rock work, nice architecture surrounding it. That's probably the best thing about this ride. Luckily, we didn't have to wait when we visited. We just hopped straight on. We elected to sit facing forwards for our first ride. As you can see, for most of the train, passengers will face each other. The only exception is the first and last rows. Despite not liking the ride my first time around, I did elect to go again so I could try it facing backwards, see if it was better. It was not. The restraints are basically like seat belts that go over your shoulders. It reminds me of the setup you get on like an RMC Raptor. So if there is a plus side, that does mean it's like impossible to bang your head. I can't even imagine this thing with big bulky restraints. Cobra begins its experience by pulling the train up backwards, this like beyond vertical spike. Certainly a neat visual, but not pleasant to actually experience. Most spikes are at a slant. Every once in a while you get a vertical spike, and those are certainly intimidating. This is a fairly scary experience being pulled up backwards like this. But when you start getting towards the top and you are like beyond vertical, that is not pleasant because all the blood starts rushing to your head and not in the fun way. And it's a slow climb too, so it's this like prolonged sensation that I'm like, okay, get me out of here. And if you elected to sit forwards, that makes the spike even worse because you're just dangling pressed into these seat belts. There's no leg restraints, so your feet are just dangling. They really should have like some sort of shin guard or something. And there's just like an immense amount of pressure on your chest. If you elected to sit backwards, you're at least pressed into the back of your seat, so that's better. But then you have to put up with the rest of the experience being backwards, which is not fun. So it really is a lose-lose situation. You're suddenly released and then begin your shaky descent into the main layout. Cobra is only 738 feet long. From this first spike, you fly through the station. There are two airtime hills, the loop, and then the scorpion tail. That is the layout. But when you can only run one train, it makes sense that they kept the ride experience tight. And frankly, it pulls so many G-forces, I'm not sure I'd want it to be any longer. But it's just a shame that Cobra doesn't even have like one good element on the entire ride. The lift hill is not fun. The two airtime hills like tried to give you airtime. It's like a weird mix of like floater and ejector air, but these restraints just press into you so much that you don't really lift up out of your seat. You shake like a baby rattle through the entire thing, and then you hit the bottom of the loop, which is just immensely rough. In the front, the G-forces hit you in the face as you enter this loop. It is so intense. One of our friends like blacked out in the front row because of all the forces. This thing is just so tight. If you like positives, then you might enjoy this experience. For me, it was too much. You're hit with more positive G-forces as you exit the loop and go straight into the scorpion tail, which is pretty wild looking. It honestly actually even looks crazier now than it used to. For the 2023 season, the scorpion tail was extended. It now has this little curved piece at the top. I'm not sure for the exact reason that this was installed. Maybe to just give the train a little extra room if it's running particularly fast. But you have a brief moment of just stalling out as you're dangling upside down. You receive hang time, but again, I'm not sure it's the fun kind of hang time. And then you have the honor of doing the whole thing again, but in reverse. Or if you elected to zip backwards, then you would experience it forwards. But now you just have a lot less speed, so those airtime hills on the way out are even worse on the way back. It's actually a pretty mild ending. It's way more intense on the way there. But then you hit the brakes in the station, and that's it. Cobra, frankly, is a lot. It's a tough one to re-ride. I didn't really want to do it multiple times. The only reason I did is because I felt like a weird sense of obligation. Like, all right, we came all the way here, might as well. And I don't know when I'd ever be back to Conny-Land. This isn't one that I think I would like seek out again. It's too much and it gave me a headache. This park doesn't have like a ton of rides. This is their biggest experience. And it didn't have a line because I don't think that the guests particularly like it. I rode with some complete strangers and they were like bracing themselves. They got off and they were like, yep, all right, that was a one and done, we'll move on. So I wouldn't say this is the best ride in the park. It's probably great for marketing, like yeah, it'll get people in the door, but it's not gonna get people to wanna stay there. So it just brings me back to, again, I'm not sure why the park decided to build this ride in the first place. My guess is just because it has that OMG wow factor upon initial glance. But PAX certainly doesn't have like the best reputation, and the fact that this ride is pretty much a disaster immediately after opening is not surprising. So there's part of me that wonders like how much longer this thing will stick around. It's about to turn 15. There's a lot better shuttle coasters that Conny-Land could put in its place. Honestly, a Vekoma family boomerang would make more sense here than this. So for Cobra's final score, I'm giving it a 2.5 out of 10. I don't like this ride. I don't really need to do it ever again. It was rough, it was uncomfortable, the G-forces were just too much. The only reason why I'm giving it any points at all is because it is pretty crazy to look at, I'll give them that, but I don't know that it's something I would recommend. So let me know down in the comments below if you've experienced Cobra at Conny-Land, if you agree with the points that I brought up. If you disagree, please let me know why. And of course, stay tuned for more coaster reviews here at Coaster Studios, and I'll see you next time.